Chapter 17. Unique Insight. I asked Mike to take a look at a couple of things and give me his opinion. Suddenly, he was irritated with me again.
I ain't no expert.
I know, I said patiently, grinning. But you've had more opportunity to observe these guys than anyone I know. I'm just curious to get your take on these things. Again, I asked him to look at the Patterson-Gimlin film and sent him a link. What do you think?
What do you mean, what do I think?
He asked, still a little pissy with me.
What do you think? You've seen them. That's how a Bigfoot moves. That's what a Bigfoot looks like. You know that. Why are people running around bitching about one in a picture? They've got one.
He didn't have much else to say about Patty until I was trying to create the artwork for the cover of the book. We went back and forth, me sending him images and files of my attempts to depict Enoch just right, and Mike getting more and more frustrated.
Look, I told you, this is what he looks like. His head's a little pointed, not like all those cone heads people draw all the time. His ears stick out sometimes, just the tips. When his hair's messed up a certain way, he's got big bushy eyebrows, like Andy Rooney. His eyes are dark brown. You ever eat a Tootsie Pop? A chocolate one? You know, how you get down about halfway and you can see the Tootsie Roll center? It's, what's the word?
Striated? I asked, tickled by his comparison.
Yeah, striated, like that.
I asked about the pupils.
His pupils are like ours, depending on the amount of light. That's what size they are. If it's dark, they get real big. If there's a lot of sunlight, they get smaller, but then he's usually squinting. His eyes are all brown. The only time I see any whites is when he looks way off to the side, you know, like a dog's eyes, but his eyes are deep.
Intense? I asked.
Yeah, especially when he's staring at me for a long time like he does. It's almost like he's getting ready to say something.
Okay, I asked. What else?
His nose is kind of broad and flat, but not like a gorilla's with those big nostrils. He's got these little pig bristles that stick out from it, and wrinkles. On the bridge, and down a little farther too. His mouth is wide and his mustache is real thick, like it grows almost out of his nostrils. It covers his upper lip. His teeth are wide and flat. His beard grows all the way up to his cheekbones, but is a little sparser as it goes up. His mustache grows down the sides of his mouth and blends with his beard. His beard has kind of a goatee, a Fu Manchu thing hanging down, about 6 inches long. His forehead has sparse hair on it that blends up into his hairline.
I sent him drawing after drawing. None of them was close to Enoch.
Okay, it's easy. Look at Patty. See the hair growth on her face? Like that. See the shape of her head? See her face, her nose? Like that. She could be his sister. She's the closest thing to what he looks like. And guess why? 'Cause she's a Bigfoot.
I laughed. Fair enough. Next, I asked Mike to look at the Freeman footage. Paul Freeman, a U.S. Forest Service employee, had a sighting near Walla Walla, WA, in 1982. The sighting created such an impression on him that he quit his job a couple of years later and spent the rest of his life searching for the creatures. Despite murmurs of hoaxing, members of the scientific community, including Dr. Grover Krantz, Dr. Henner Fahrenbach, and Dr. Jeff Meldrum, supported tracks cast by Freeman as critical evidence. Jimmy Chilcutt, a fingerprinting expert who had studied the feet and hands of great apes, analyzed dermal ridges on the casts and found them to be inconsistent with any known primate. In 1994, Freeman was following a series of tracks near Deduct Creek when he filmed a bulky, dark-haired creature. When I was working with producer Doug Hajicek on Mysterious Encounters in 2003, Doug showed me the footage on his big screen high-definition TV. Toward the end of the footage, there is a brief shot of what appears to be an additional creature lifting a juvenile. The feet and legs of the tiny creature were clearly visible on the high-definition screen, ankles articulating. According to Doug Hajicek, Freeman had never mentioned the juvenile to him, and Hajicek told me he didn't think Freeman was even aware that it was in the footage. Freeman passed away from complications of diabetes in 2003. When Mike watched the footage, despite the poor quality clip on YouTube, I was able to point out the lifting of the juvenile. Toward the end of the clip, he had this to say.
That's what my big guy looks like when I see him in the woods, and that is the way he moves. Notice how he looks at Freeman, then looks at where he's going, then back at him. They're very careful where they put their feet so they don't misstep and get hurt. And as far as the little one, it makes sense that mama would carry her young to get away from danger, or some dude with a camera.
Next, I asked Mike to look at the Memorial Day footage. Filmed in May of 1996 by Lori Pate on a barren hillside above Chopaka Lake in northern Washington, the Memorial Day footage appears to show a rather small creature running in the open. It passes behind a small hill briefly. Interestingly, when the creature nears the tree line at the far side of the open area, it raises an arm over its shoulder and seems to grow several inches. Again, viewed on a high-definition screen, it appears that it is lifting a small infant onto its shoulders. Though some researchers question the authenticity of the Memorial Day footage, I've always leaned toward these images being authentic, and Mike thought they might be too.
All you have to see is the last 10 seconds, the way it moves. See the way it runs across the hill? Nothing moves the way they do. Fast and sure-footed.
Next, we turn to the Sierra Sounds. In the early 1970s, Ron Moorhead and Alan Berry returned again and again to Warren and Lewis Johnson's hunting camp in the high Sierras and recorded many close-range, interactive, vocal exchanges between what were assumed to be Bigfoot creatures and the men in the camp. There are a couple of reasons I've personally been a proponent of the Sierra Sounds. I have known Ron Moorhead for many years and have found him to be very credible. But more than that, the sounds recorded in that camp closely approximate those descriptions given by many witnesses over the years of close-range vocalizations they've heard. Since Mike had been in such close proximity to these creatures for so many years, I figured he'd be able to tell me if he'd ever heard anything like these sounds. I sent him several audio tracks via email, and we listened to them together over the phone. Mike started chuckling.
You hear that really garbled sound he's making right there?
He asked. Yeah?
Enoch does that all the time. He'll be sitting next to me in camp, eating, and our conversations will go something like this. How you doing today, buddy? Blurg ragglebleg. Really? Well, why is that? Bragableg raggaroo. She did that to you? What did you say? Agarug blag blagger rackamurd. Well, I hope you told her off.
I laughed. Mike's approximation of the Sierra Sounds was eerily accurate.
It's like when you sit and have a conversation with your dog or something. You're talking nonsense and they're making noise in response. Lots of times, though, when they're interacting with each other, it sounds almost like a Native American language. Do you ever watch those old Western movies where the Indians are speaking to one another in their language? It reminds me of that.
We continued listening to the tracks I sent him, and he stopped on track 9. This track has always been of particular interest to me because the sounds are better, formed, and sound more like language than gibberish.
There.
Mike said.
Do you hear that?
That was a particular piece of the recording in which the creature was forming what sounded like commands in an authoritative voice. There was silence on the other end of the phone. I wasn't expecting what came next.
Shit.
Mike said, and barked a short, almost hysterical laugh. What? I asked.
Oh, shit.
He said again.
This is really weird.
Silence.
Sometimes I'll be standing around at work and the Mexican guys be speaking to each other in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but I'll grasp what they're saying without even realizing it and interject something into the conversation.
He hesitated.
I think I just understood what he said.
It was my turn to get quiet. What did he say? I could tell Mike was struggling with this.
Well, it sounded to me like he was upset. The men are mimicking him, repeating what he's saying like it's a game, but he's shouting in anger because the men are in between him and something that matters to him.
I didn't know what to say. Strangely and coincidentally, I had an opportunity to speak on the phone for the first time about a week later with Dave Johnson, the son of the man who owned the hunting camp. During our 2-hour conversation, I thought about what Mike had said and asked Dave a subtle but pointed question. You know, on track 9, when the big guy is shouting out what sounds like words? What was going on in that night? Dave told me.
The guys thought that one of the younger ones had gotten over on the other side of the camp, and they were between it and the rest of them.
Mike was unknowingly helping me put pieces of the puzzle into place, one by one. Pieces that had been sitting on my desk for years, gathering dust. Pieces that had seemed compelling, yet had no real useful context before now. The more I learned of Mike's story, the more I was reminded of a similar story I'd read years before. A small book, The Creature, Personal Experiences with Bigfoot, by Jan Clement, was published under a pseudonym, and the author's identity has never been revealed. The Creature tells the supposedly true story of this man's encounters with a Sasquatch-type creature he befriended in southwestern Pennsylvania at his remote cabin in the woods. Kicked out of his house by his wife due to an indiscretion, Clement began to stay at the cabin alone. Clement's first sighting occurred on a late August afternoon. He had just finished working on digging a pond and retired to the porch to drink a beer. The creature was crouched near the porch and dashed away into the brush when Clement reacted. Soon, however, Clement was able to entice the creature in with food offerings and study the creature at length on numerous occasions. He called the creature Kong due to its size. What follows in the book are detailed descriptions of the creature's appearance and behavior, the author's interactions with the creature, and the subsequent demise and burying of Kong in an undisclosed location. When I first read the book, I didn't know what to make of it. Clement's description of the creature made it seem slow, or perhaps a little stupid, and honestly, I felt slightly incredulous due to the rather animal-sounding description of it. It didn't gel with other reports I'd gotten from long-term witnesses that alluded to Sasquatch being a more intelligent, human-like creature. However, when Mike began to share details of his encounters with Enoch with me, I was struck by how similar many of the details were to those related by Clement. The physical description of the creature, eating habits, behaviors, even the living situation, concerns for the creature's safety, and subsequent difficulties of keeping the experience to himself were similar. Many of the parallels were startling. A phone call I made recently to John Tomakel, the publisher, has lent even more credibility to the Clement story. I called to ask his permission to quote the book here, and what followed was a rather lengthy and pleasant conversation. I asked Tomakel if he knew the author personally. He said he did. When I asked him what he thought about the book, his answer was candid. He told me that he found Clement to be a very credible man and a scientific-minded one, but said that he had mixed feelings about the book. When I asked why, Tomakel told me it wasn't because of Clement's credibility. He just didn't know whether he personally believed in Bigfoot. When asked if Clement had ever expressed an interest in anything else strange, or written any other books on anything like this, he said,
No. He had written 3 other books, all very scientific, about forest and swamp animals, the natural world.
He also explained to me, when I asked who owned the rights to the book, that his publishing company did. He had, since it was published. He had paid Clement $300 when he handed over his story, mainly to cover the author's expenses for travel and hiring a typist. So he wasn't in it for the money?
No.
Tomakel replied,
He never made a dime on it past that $300 I gave him.
And he certainly wasn't in it for the fame, Tomakel laughed.
Anonymous fame? No.
Huh, I said. I was finally finding more context for the book's credibility.
You know,
Tomakel continued,
when his cabin was torched, we went up there soon after.
So he really did have a cabin?
Yeah.
He replied. I asked Mike if he'd ever heard of the book. He hadn't. I copied the text of the book from an online source and posted it in our private online documents so Mike could read it and make notes. His comments, written sporadically in bold red at the end of one paragraph after another, were insightful. For instance, Clement wrote,
I knew that the paltry food I offered could not support the body of such a huge creature, and his diet puzzled me. It was partially explained by the event which I shall relate. I will tell this story now, even though it occurred much later in time. It was evening, and Kong and I were squatting in front of the porch staring at each other when a deer appeared off to the side of the cabin. It was the first young one I had ever seen on my property. It spotted us and shot up road toward the top of the hill. Kong leaped to his feet and was off like a flash of lightning. His speed was fantastic as he ran the deer down before it got more than 100 feet away. He picked it up in his powerful hands and slammed it to the ground, I assume killing it instantly. Instead of returning to me, he put the deer under his arm and stalked off through the brush. I did not see him again for 5 days.
Mike's response to this.
It was because he became a food source, and the deer gave the big guy all he needed to survive, and he didn't need the man. I've seen that. If there was no food, he wouldn't come around as much. They don't have time to be social and sit around and shoot the breeze. If you don't feed him, he'll feed himself.
On some points, it seemed Mike disagreed with Clement. Regarding communicating with the creature, Clement wrote,
In about 3 weeks, I taught him some commands that seemed to be necessary. He learned to stay by my giving threatening gestures and holding him with repetition of the word over and over. I would put my arms around his chest and arms and press him downward and say, "Stay, stay." In the early training, he finally got the idea. I had tried rewarding him with apples, but he seemed to make no connection with the apples and the performance of the deed. I always tried to use the word stay with my arm extended, fingers out with palm down.
Mike replied,
You can do this, but I found it's more monkey see, monkey do. If you gesture enough, he seems to understand what you want, but it takes a long time. Again, you have to do the same things over and over, then one day he'll do it. Like the night he got that one chasing me to leave me alone, he touched his chest and put his hand out to me and walked away.
and, on some points, Mike agreed.
Cone didn't seem to grasp the meaning of yes or okay, because he had no need for asking permission. In the world of nature, the creatures take what they want or do what they wish and are only deterred by superior force or logic. Therefore, he didn't need to ask me if it was okay to eat an apple. If he had an apple in his hand and wanted to eat it, he would. If I took an apple away from him and he wanted it back, I wasn't in any position to prevent this.
To this, Mike commented,
I couldn't have said it better. He does what he wants when he wants. No or may I aren't in his vocabulary.
I found it particularly fascinating that both Mike and Clement had described the creatures staring for long periods of time. Clement wrote,
In our many hours of just squatting and looking at each other, there seemed to be no purpose on his part. He seemed to anticipate that I would devise something or do something to give him something. It does not seem strange to me that we would sit and look at each other for hours. The longest Kong and I stared at each other was probably 2.5 hours. I do not want to give the impression that this went on in marathon fashion with a massive stare down. I would just study him for about a half hour and then do some little work around the cabin and go back to the spot, and Kong would still be there ready for another half-hour session. His patience was remarkable. These sessions seemed to produce a hypnotic trance on him, but when I would move, it would break the spell and he would shuffle. While in the staring state, he would appear to be immobilized, but then all of a sudden he would move and break this spell.
Mike's reaction to this,
Enoch, and I do this all the time. It's like he's staring into your soul, not moving for hours. Sometimes I wonder if he is sleeping with his eyes open. It's kind of like a trance he goes into, or maybe one of the sleep stages before you fall asleep. I think there's 3 stages of sleeping people. Why not them?
Clement mentioned that he thought the smell of his sweat is what first caused Kong to approach. Mike commented,
When I go to the woods, I don't take a real bath for days, even weeks when I'm out there. I didn't want any unnatural smells on me, and when I jump in the river to wash, he won't get as close to me. That's why I recommend people not to wear stuff that smells. I don't even wash my clothes with soap, only hot water. I wash my feet so as not to get fungus and my crotch so not to get a rash. But no soap, no nothing. When in the woods, you need to smell as natural as you can, no matter how bad the smell gets.
When Clement wrote of Kong not liking citrus, Mike said,
He'll only eat citrus if there is nothing else to eat and makes funny faces like it's sour or too tart. It helps to take the peel off citrus. There's a lot of acid in it, and I think it burns his mouth. I know it does mine.
Mike agreed with Clement that the creatures are savvy about not leaving footprints as well. Clement stated,
He did not show on rainy days or when the ground was very soft and wet.
Mike responded,
When the ground is soft or wet, he tends to walk off the trails and even steps over a trail when crossing it. Or if humans are in the area, he'll stay off the trails.
But perhaps one of the most interesting parallels were the similarities in how each man felt about betrayal of the creatures they'd befriended.
I contemplated what to do about divulging Kong's existence and what was to be the future of the creature and our relationship. I couldn't keep him to myself very much longer, and yet I hated to expose him to the world not of his own choosing. It was a feeling, as I recall, like I was about to double-cross an old and trusted friend, although I had only been acquainted with him about 6 weeks up to that time.
Mike shared that sentiment.
This is how I feel. It's like I said, how do you betray that kind of trust? It would be like a baby to the lions. They would tear him apart and there would be nothing left. And what right do I have to do that? How could I live with myself after doing such a thing? And think how he would feel being betrayed by someone he trusted. Put yourself in his place and think about it.
Mike and I discussed the book during our next phone call. I asked him, given his own experiences, whether he thought the book was a true account. His answer surprised me.
I think it's true. Yeah, I don't agree with everything he said. Like when he was talking about not bathing and said that was what attracted the creature. When I go out into the swamp, I don't use detergent, deodorant, or anything that smells unnatural. I wash with water and let my natural smells take over. But this guy said that he thought that Cone came around after he'd been digging all day because he was sweaty. I don't think that's why.
Mike stopped in mid-thought and digressed. He posed a question to me, as he often does, trying to get his point across like a patient teacher, making the student think.
When he was out there every day digging, what did he do when he was done? He went inside, got a beer, and sat on the porch. The next day, when he was done digging, what did he do? He went inside, got a beer, and sat on the porch. It's him doing the same thing over and over again that made Kong come around. I think.
Because he was predictable, I murmured, the realization of what Mike was saying dawning on me, the student finally catching up to the teacher.
Right. They like to know what you're going to do.
Because it allows them to feel in control, I blurted, finishing his sentence.
You got it.
Mike sounded pleased.
It's the repetition. It's not enough just to go out there and do what you do. You have to do the same things every time. They'll sit back and watch you. And when they realize that that's what you do and that's all you're going to do, they'll feel comfortable enough to come in.
For years, I had been preaching the need for researchers to go out into the woods and simply act like people instead of sneaking around like gorillas wearing camo and ghillie suits. I had stressed the need to behave in ways that were curiosity-provoking and non-threatening, of going out in the dark when the creatures would feel most safe. I thought I had grasped the importance of allowing them to remain in control, but all along, I had been missing the one piece of the puzzle: repetition. I understood. It was the repetition, the patience necessary to sit on a log or hang around in camp, doing the same things, day in and day out, behaving predictably, that would cause these creatures to feel safe enough to approach. It was a simple formula. Repetition equals predictability. Predictability equals control. Control equals trust. I thought about it a minute. No wonder researchers haven't had any luck. I said, most of us are weekend warriors who don't have the luxury of spending that kind of time in the woods. And when we do go out there, we feel rushed. Our heads are wrapped up in whatever agenda we have, whatever it is that we hope to accomplish. Our behavior is ruled by that agenda, and we push for things to happen. Something else became clearer in that moment. These creatures were approaching long-term witnesses who experienced repeated encounters at their homesteads because they had likely been observing the witness over a long period of time. The Sasquatches watched them, got to know their behavior and schedules. The witnesses were predictable. I thought about Jane Goodall, Dian Fossey. Their presence in the forests and jungles always amounted to the same thing: sitting quietly, watching, waiting, daily. Their behavior was predictable as well. But these creatures, according to Mike, weren't merely apes. I steered the conversation back to the part of Clement's book that had bothered me. Was it just me? I asked. Or did Kong seem particularly stupid?
You mean, was he like mentally retarded?
Mike was silent for a moment.
Actually, I think he was ill.
He said quietly.
I think maybe he had something that was terminal. At least, that's what it sounded like to me.
I thought about that for a moment, and it made sense. Clement had alluded to Kong's health deteriorating, and near the end of the story, he had found Kong dead. When I'd reread The Creature, despite the fact that there were many similarities in Clement's and Mike's stories, I was struck by how differently the two men approached the subject. Clement proclaimed that he was scientifically trained, and it showed. Much of his discourse on Kong was rather dry and analytical. Mike's was relaxed and observational. I thought again about how witnesses interpret their experiences through their own outlook on the world, and how that can color not only the way a witness relates their experiences, but perhaps the experiences themselves. In other words, Clement couldn't help interacting with Kong as a scientist. Mike, on the other hand, approached Enoch as a friend. That would likely explain the ultimate differences in the level of interaction between the two men and their creatures. It was the difference between thinking and feeling. It was the difference between the head and the heart. Mike's comments to me at the end of the Clement story said it all.
Hunger, loneliness, the longing for companionship, the need to feel safe and loved can bring two different things together, one taking what it needs from the other to survive, forming a bond that can last a lifetime, a bond that goes beyond love or friendship, the giving of oneself, a trust, a connection that breaks the chains that normally keep them apart. Being as different as they are, deep down the two are the same. They come to understand and trust one another, and that, my friend, is something that comes around once in a lifetime, and most times, never at all. How can you betray a trust such as that? How can you put a price on a friendship that goes beyond all others? This is very disturbing to me, and it has given me pause for thought and reflection about the last 10 years. I understand how he felt and why he did what he did, and I see a lot of what I did in this story. It's a burden to carry alone, and alone is the only way you can do it. I gave up a big piece of my life over this, and I've paid a high price for the knowledge I have. I believe this story to be true, as I feel the same way he did. It becomes your life and takes a lot away from you and replaces it with knowledge you can't share. I've become more withdrawn from life and people because of it. To have a secret like this and to live a secret life that nobody knows about takes a lot out of you. You learn the art of deception, and you tend to stay away from people who might find you out. You lie to family and friends about what you're doing, and along the way, you lose respect for yourself. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't trade the world for his friendship and trust. I just wish it didn't have such a big price tag. Looking forward, I wonder what'll become of me and him. I think he's where he wants to be, and for the most part, as happy as a big guy can be. Me, on the other hand, I'm not happy, and I'm not where I want to be. And ever since the day I opened this can of worms, it's gotten worse. I wish it'd go away and leave me be. When your big guy finds you, only then will you know what's in your heart and what kind of person you are. I think most people will be surprised to find that they really never knew themselves at all. It is a humbling feeling to know that you have the lives of a whole species in your hands, and one wrong move could destroy them all. I've become paralyzed, not knowing what to do. If I come forward and tell what I know, I'm afraid it'll be the beginning of the end for them. I just wish people would leave them alone and let them choose what and who they want in their lives. This book, The Creature, should be the Bigfoot researcher's Bible, and they should study it and try to understand why it's more important that they not be discovered. Or maybe you have to have one in your life to fully understand what Clement was trying to tell us and why he did what he did in the end. I think that everyone who's ever had an ongoing relationship with these creatures comes to realize that they can never tell. I believe the bond becomes too strong and they want to protect them, not exploit them. And that's why nobody comes forward. When one is caught or killed, it will be by someone who only wants the fame of being the one who found Bigfoot. But they've already been found many times. Some call them friend, and those are the ones who truly understand. Those are the ones who won't betray the trust, the bond that they have, and that is for the most part while they stay in the shadows. I think that the old saying, to know him is to love him, rings true. Once he becomes a part of your life, you come to understand what he is, and you see the humanity in the beast. If you ever get to look into his eyes, you too will understand. With this comes the burden of having a secret that you can never tell, for what is a secret to me is life to them.